On everybody, Dylan Napoleone with Cage Side Press, joined today by a Bellator vet, a former LFA champion, getting ready to make his next walk to the LFA cage this weekend, LFA 207. Today, I am joined by Bryce Logan. Bryce, how are you, man? And thank you for the time.
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for having me on. Good to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited, man. And you know, Stanford Pentagon. I've been there before for a Bellator fight, and now you're preparing for not a Bellator fight, but you fought there before, obviously, but an LFA fight out there in South Dakota. So this is a very cool moment. I think this card is absolutely stacked. You have a great matchup on your hands. What can you tell me about just everything in general about this, fight week coming as we are in fight week, this fight week, and just what's at stake here?
It's this will probably be my seventh or eighth time fighting at the Pentagon, and I can't express how much I enjoy fighting back at home. And it's such a great venue. If you haven't been there, I do think it's one of the it's such an intimate venue. There's not a bad seat in the house, and it's just it has the big arena feel, even though it only seats about 5 to 6 thousand max probably. But it's always a pleasure to come home and fight in front of the hometown fans. I moved to Arizona like 8 years ago to
Yeah.
train full time, and any opportunity I get to come home and put on a show and do what I've been doing for the last 16 years, which is competing in MMA. It's a blessing.
Absolutely. And for you, obviously being a South Dakota guy, was there a period of time where LFA had announced that they were returning back out there, but maybe you found yourself in an exciting place, I want to get on this card, or was it as soon as they announced the card, they called you? Was there any anticipation getting onto this card?
To be honest, I found out about 8 weeks ago.
Yeah.
6 to 8 weeks ago, my manager hit me up. I've actually spent the last 6 to 8 months boxing. I had a couple of professional boxing bouts, and I was, with Bellator kind of going away and getting caught up in the mix. I was kind of in limbo, and I didn't, being 35, I didn't want to just do nothing, and I
Right.
still had that fire to compete. So my manager, approached me, would you be interested in boxing? So I did a few boxing bouts, and
You did
I've
what?
been active, but I made the switch back to, I never stopped training MMA. I was still coming in and getting sparring rounds in and helping my teammates that had fights get ready. So, just keeping the sword sharp, I guess you would say. But, he was, to be 100% honest, I was looking for another boxing match, and I couldn't find anything that kind of lined up for this spring. And Oren with KO Reps hit me up, and he was like, "Hey, man, I could get you on that Sioux Falls LFA card. They kind of called and asked about you." And he's like, "So you can either do nothing or we can get back in there and have a fight." And I'm not one to just kind of sit around and do nothing. I know I'm 35, so I still want to take as many bites at the apple as I can before Father Time tells me it's time to hang it up. So and I like the matchup. I don't want to fight. I've never been one that wants an easy fight. So, Landry comes from a reputable gym. He comes from a good camp. So I like the matchup. I like the challenge that it presents for me. And so we hopped on it, and I feel great, man. Honestly, I think the boxing experience has made me a little bit sharper as well.
I was going to ask you about that, man. Obviously, you have the wrestling background and you have the experience wrestling. MMA, obviously, you can box, you can wrestle, you can do, a bunch of different things. But in the boxing world, I bet you that was a good time for you to kind of, you obviously spent so much time wrestling. You spent some time really focusing on those hands. How was that time spent? Do you think it really developed your boxing game?
I think, yeah, dude, I think it did. And I think what it did mostly for me is just made me a little bit more comfortable um, in the mix is what I call it. When you kind of get in the pocket, and in MMA, we have the ability to kind of step out of being right in front of each other,
Yep.
whether that's through using your kicks. It just has made me more comfortable in the exchange or in the pocket, I guess you would say. Um, in MMA, you always have the option to shoot a takedown, or you have the option to kind of step away and keep the fight at a longer range with kicks and stuff like that. And
Right.
spending 4 to 6 months where I felt like I was a fish out of water right away. I was like, holy crap, I can't like level change and wrestle. So it kind of forced me to evolve my skill set a little bit. And ever since stepping back into MMA, I just feel a little more comfortable with range and seeing punches a little differently than I saw them before, I guess is all I would say about it.
Yeah, man, that's good though. That's a good thing for a fighter like you. Obviously, you have knockouts. Your last Bellator fight, you ended the fight against Peter Coyley with a knockout, man. That's a big statement, if you will. And then unfortunately, Bellator kind of took their turn. I feel like maybe coming off that win, what was the energy like, and was it kind of a buzzkill once you found out that?
Yeah, man, it put me in a weird place for a little bit, because the start I had a couple close losses at the beginning of my career, but I thought that beating a former Bellator champion, I
Dominant.
was like, I thought maybe they would give me one more crack at the apple and give me a chance to maybe stick around. And when my manager reached out to them about another fight, that's when they kind of told us, hey, we're not really re-signing anybody right now because we're in the process of selling the company to the PFL. And so it really forced me to take a step back for a second and think about what I wanted to do. I was like, dang, is this it for me? Is this how it's going to end? Am I going to jump back onto the regional scene? Am I going to switch to boxing and pick up a different sport entirely? And but yeah, like I was feeling great after that. And it is what it is. All good things sometimes come to an end. But I knew that my story wasn't over yet, I guess you could say, and I knew that I had tread left on the tires, and I still have the desire to compete. And I was talking to Coach Eddie yesterday at Fight Ready, and I was like, man, it's funny because I feel like I'm a better fighter now than I ever have been, and just without an avenue to display my skills. So I was super super grateful that LFA came calling and had interest in bringing me back in for another fight.
Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect, man. And respect to you, because I was around the Bellator scene for quite a while too. And for me, I've been doing this journalism stuff for probably about 2.5 years, and I covered so many Bellator events, man. I was, flying around the country, going to these Bellator events, and that's where I really started. And then Bellator finished up, and at that point, I hadn't been covering any like UFC, and I had nothing else kind of deal. So I was like, it's like, man, like, what am I gonna do? Because I was using Bellator was a great platform for me to build myself up as a journalist, get the experience, and really just connect with great fighters. A lot of, I don't have to explain it to you, but the talent pool that Bellator had was, pretty special. And
Yeah, and I feel like that being the last fight on my contract actually turned out to be a blessing in disguise, because I had a lot of friends and people that you meet through the years in Bellator that were still under contract with them, and
couldn't get a fight.
honestly, they ended up getting a year to a year and a half of their prime fighting career wasted kind of in limbo while they were waiting to see what happened. And it
There's
it
still
turned
guys
out to
going
be,
through it now.
like I said, it sucked at the time, but it was a blessing because I was able to jump out and pursue a little different avenue and get some boxing and get some pro boxing fights in and just get to compete while a lot of my friends were just kind of sitting and taking a wait and see approach. And obviously we know what ended up ultimately happening, but for me, it, like the life lessons and the cliches are always there, but everything happens for a reason. And I spent a lot of time where I was like, man, this is, why am I not on contract? How come I don't have, this? And it turned out to be a good thing, man. A lot of those guys never ever got another fight with Bellator, and they sat and waited for a year and a half.
Yeah.
So everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely, 100%. That's awesome. And I want to talk to you about this LFA 207 out there in Sioux Falls. We're gonna get that to that in just a second. I want to ask you about those two boxing fights, right? It was two of them, if I'm not mistaken, two knockouts. I mean, man, that's some dominant performances on your behalf, and coming from a guy who hadn't boxed before, that's special. So how was that experience for you? And I know you talked about it earlier, but what kind of things did it do for the mindset?
Dude, it was a lot of fun actually. It's I made the joke to one of my coaches. I go, it feels like you just started dating somebody new. It kind of
And news, yeah.
yep, because I've been doing that. My first MMA fight as an amateur was when I was 18 and I'm 35 now. So I was like, after 14, 15 years of the same type of training, just to kind of switch up how the training takes place. And, you get to the ins and the outs. A fight is a fight, but the ins and the outs are a little different between the two sports. And I actually got to fight, like I said, that Masvidal Diaz card for my first professional boxing fight was at the Honda Center in Anaheim. And I'm
Sick.
boxing one of Nate Diaz's teammates. And, I was nobody thought I was going to go in and win that fight except for me. I knew the skills I had, and um, my boxing coach Alan Veers actually was taking me around all the boxing gyms here in Phoenix and just catching rounds with guys that were pro boxers, 11 and 0, 12 and 0, and after about 3 to 4 weeks, I was beating some of these guys up, and he goes, man, he goes, if you could go back in time, he goes, I would have told you to never touch the sport of MMA, and we could have made a lot of money being a pro boxer.
Yeah.
Because he's like, you just have some natural skills for it, and it was. I had so much fun, dude. I did the one out in Anaheim, and then I grabbed another local fight here in in Phoenix, and the guy I boxed was only 1-0 as a pro, but I think he had like over 50 amateur bouts as a boxer.
Yeah.
And so to be able to step in there and not only just like hold my own, but to excel against guys that have been boxing for their whole career just gave me that little shot of confidence. Like, hey man, you're more than just a wrestler. You have other abilities and you have other skills, and it's really helped me to just kind of believe in myself as a fighter as well. So kind of rekindled some of the confidence that I may have lost a little bit through my Bellator career, taking some close losses and stuff like that. The doubt starts to creep in sometimes, and
Yep.
jumping into a different sport and excelling against guys that have been doing it for their whole career kind of brought me back to where I was before with that self-belief and just knowing that I have the tools necessary to get guys out of there.
Dude, that is sick, man. Good for you. That's how you make the most of the time, right? Because it was a big waiting period, and like you mentioned earlier, a lot of guys kind of just sat and waited around. Now, obviously, if you're under contract, that you kind of don't have an option. But for you, man, that's how you make the most of your time now. Obviously, this Friday night, getting ready for LFA 207 out there in Sioux Falls, very cool city. I went to a Bellator event out there. That's a cool spot. But you got Landry Ward on your hands, who I believe, right, has a couple Bellator or a couple PFL fights under his belt. You do too, of course, 4-0 in the PFL cage coming into this one.
Or for LFA, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, PFL. I'm sorry, man. Landry has a couple LFA fights. You have your 4-0 in the LFA cage coming into this one. Um, to me, man, this is a great matchup of two guys who are doing well within their careers right now. Both, this whoever wins this fight, all the respect to both you guys. This is a huge win for either one of you guys. What can you tell me about this matchup itself, man?
Yeah, and like props to him for taking the fight as well. Obviously he's a game opponent, and like I said earlier on the interview, I've never been interested at any point in my career in taking the easy road. Even before I got to Bellator, I was 12-4 when I got to Bellator, and all four of the guys that beat me spent time in either the UFC
Yeah.
or in Bellator. And I think the game has changed a little bit with the introduction of Dana White's Contender Series. I think a lot of these younger prospects are doing a lot more protecting of their records, trying to get to the Contender Series. And I come from a time in MMA when, whether you think it's right or wrong, you didn't really get to say no to fights. Back in the day, the promoters would be like, hey, this is the fight we have for you. You don't have to take it, but we also don't have to call you back next time.
Right.
So I always make the joke, I didn't know you could say no to a fight until I got into Bellator, and I was a little bit injured and I got offered a fight, and my coaches were like, hey, like, you don't have to say yes.
Yeah.
And I was like, what do you mean? I was like, I didn't know that I could just say no. I came from a time in MMA when the best guys fought the best guys even on the way up. And
Yeah.
no knock against these younger guys. It's they're smarter than we were, man. To be honest, it's a business, and you got to protect yourself. And the window of opportunity is so short in this sport that they're doing what they think is the best thing to try to secure some
Yeah.
financial security for themselves. So I don't knock it. They're probably smarter than we were. We were just at the very beginning of this sport, and we're out there fighting whoever whenever. But I think that has played into my favor throughout my career because I've been tested and I've been in there against some absolute killers, and I
Yeah.
know what it's like to go and face a tough opponent. So I didn't want anything less, and I'm very happy with the opponent that I was given for this. I think it's going to be a great test, and that's if you're not willing to test yourself, I don't believe that MMA is the sport for you.
Yeah, 100%. Well said, man. And I wanted to piggyback off of that. Obviously, you said, how other fighters are doing it nowadays is a little bit differently. Do you at all see that detrimental being a guy who's been around the sport a little bit more than others? Because listen, if you see guys, and I totally respect it, like what you said, trying to get to the UFC, make some real money and be a little bit more financially stable. Do you see that detrimental at all? Because some guys, you see them get to the UFC, they haven't exactly been tested, they haven't put themselves in those situations, and it's a very short stint in the UFC.
Yep. Yeah. And honestly, I think, regional MMA has taken a hit because of the Contender Series. You see a lot less guys that are willing to step in there and really test themselves. But like you said, you get to the UFC and you lose your first two fights and you're done, man. And so you've got to kind of weigh the pros and cons of both approaches. Like
Yeah.
is just getting to the UFC the goal, or do you want to get there and
I mean,
and be battle tested and been put in tough spots already where you can have some staying power and the ability to go through some adversity. If
yeah,
you're 7-0 and you fought 7 tomato cans before you get there, and then you get the old O2 barbecue and you get cut, where do you go from there? It's back to the drawing board. So like I said, there's pros and cons to both approaches, but I've always felt good about the choices I made, and I don't have record obsession, like, and I think that's what's more beautiful about MMA versus boxing, and that's one of the main differences is like in MMA, nobody has record obsession as much as they do in boxing. You lose one fight in boxing and you're done.
yeah, I
As
know.
far as like being the A side or being the guy that the promotions put their dollars into to try to push. And in MMA, if you show up and you fight your ass off and put on a good show, you could be shit, I'm 13-8, and when you look at it, everybody's like, oh man, you've lost 8 fights. And I'm like, yeah, and look at the 8 dudes I've lost to. I'm not ashamed of it one bit. I just love to get out there and I love to fight and I love to compete. And I was telling my coach the other day, I feel really free going into this fight because as a 35-year-old that's already been in Bellator, the UFC may or may not be looking at me. And I don't really care either way. I'm fighting because I love to fight and I love to compete and I want to be there. And I think that makes me dangerous, versus going in there and feeling like, oh my God, everything's riding on this. If I lose my shot. Dude, I don't care. I'm there to fight. I'm there to put on a show. And to be honest, I think it gives me the freedom to perform at my best versus like always being so outcome driven. I'm more looking for a good performance. And
Yeah,
if I perform to my abilities, I know that the outcome is going to take care of itself. But I don't have to carry that weight anymore of like, oh man, what are Mick and Dana and Sean Shelby going to think if I lose this fight? Dude, I don't care.
yeah.
I'm there to throw down and have some fun and do this as many times as I can before my body says that's enough. So
That's sick, man. Good on you. That is I love that mindset. When you adopted that kind of mindset, when you really accepted that and said, listen, man, that not everything is riding on this fight, or what you said a minute ago. How different did that make you? I don't know, maybe different is the right word, but just the way you carry yourself and the way you prepare for these fights, did that change a lot for you?
That changed for me when I got the opportunity to go fight Quealy in Ireland,
Yeah.
because at that point I knew my back was against the wall,
Yeah.
and I was like, you know what? Let's just send it,
Dude,
instead of being so conservative and thinking you have to fight this perfect fight, or do everything just the right way. I was like, let's just send it. Let's go out there and surrender the result to the higher powers, like let's just have fun and kind of embrace these opportunities that I get, versus being so scared of a negative outcome where you don't even scratch the surface of your actual abilities.
yeah.
Um,
You probably
so
had,
yeah, I think that for me, that's when things changed, was getting that shot to go to Ireland, and everybody,
yeah.
I think the people around me thought I could win, but I feel like myself was the only one that really truly believed that I was going to win. I
Yeah.
think everybody supported me and was like, "Oh, that's really cool opportunity for you, man." But like in my heart, I was like, "I'm going to go win this fight because I'm going to show everybody who I am and what I'm capable of."
Yeah, man, that's probably the same kind of mindset that you had when you went into the boxing fight, especially on the Masvidal card. Yeah.
No expectations, man. Nobody had any expectations of me. So it was freeing. It was the ability to just go and do instead of overthinking everything.
It's nice when you can kind of I don't know what the way to put it is, but you know, you had the back against the wall and you probably didn't have too many people that were expecting these victories. And it's nice when you don't have that pressure and you're able to kind of I not there's nobody to disappoint. You can only excite people, you know what I mean?
Yep.
There's nothing like that. But yeah, we have a boxer out of here in Connecticut, Cordell Booker. He just fought Sebastian Fundora and he got the fight on like I think like 6 weeks notice or something, and he had the same mindset going into the fight. He wasn't victorious in the fight, but he had the same thing. It's like, listen, man, you know, this is an opportunity, an experience, and you got no one when you're he was a huge underdog in the fight. But when you're like that, man, you got nobody to disappoint. You can really only motivate and excite people. You know what I
It
mean?
makes you dangerous, man.
100%, 100%. Now, I want to ask you a couple questions about this 207 card out there. What does it mean to you getting back out there, Sioux Falls? Like you said, a lot of experience out there competing, whether it be MMA, you wrestled a lot too. What's it like going back out to Sioux Falls? And that's your home town, no?
Yeah, home state. I lived in Sioux
Okay.
Falls for 5 or 6 years after I graduated college.
Okay.
But South Dakota is a small community of, it's a big state area wise, but everybody knows everybody, and people will travel a few hours away to come and watch, and it's always a treat to go back there. Like traveling the world to fight is great fun, but there's also something to be said about getting to do it in front of, my parents are going to be there, my brothers and sisters, my aunts and uncles, and old friends that I used to work with in Sioux Falls, and old training partners, and being able to reconnect,
Yeah.
and go back to your roots a little bit it always just leaves me in a good place after I get the opportunities to go back and do that, because those people have a lot of, they take a lot of pride in what I've done and what I've accomplished. So it feels like a good way to give back and go and do something to show my appreciation for how they all helped me get to where I got to. I would have never achieved the things I did without all of those people. So it's it's my favorite place to fight.
Yeah.
Ireland was cool, Anaheim and Connecticut and traveling to all these places are cool, but it'll always hold a special place for me, because that's where my career kind of launched off from, and it always feels good to get back there and perform. So
People say that in sports or any real world kind of thing, it's like when you stay at home and you're like the superstar of the state or the city or whatever it may be, that like people don't recognize it as much. But when you go somewhere else, like right now you're in Arizona, when you go somewhere else and you return home, that's when people really start to look at you and say like, wow, like this guy's doing it for real. You know what I mean?
yep, big time. And I grew up in a town of 150 people.
Yeah.
So the things that I've been able to do, if I could go back in time and tell my high school self, like, hey man, this is what you're going to accomplish, I would have never believed it.
Yeah.
So um I have a lot of pride in what I've accomplished. So I know that the people around me share that pride, and they feel, and they're way more vocal about it than I am. They never hesitate to tell me, like, man, I just want to tell you it's so cool to see you still doing this, like
Yeah.
guys I went to high school with that are like, man, I can't believe you're 35 and like you're still doing this, man. Like, I just want to let you know I think it's so cool that you're still able to do this. And blah, X, Y, or Z statement that they make, it it really helps me put it into perspective for myself
Yeah.
when other people express, the pride they take in telling people, like, hey, I know that guy. I went to high school with him, or I used to work with him at a bar in Sioux Falls. And like, yeah, it's a full circle moment, really, just coming back home again and getting another opportunity. And you really never know when the last chance is going to be to do it. So that's the way, I'm not saying this will be my last fight. By no means will this be my last fight. But again, you never know if it'll be my last time getting to compete in my home state. So I'm really trying to take it all in and really just enjoy.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. Good for you. Great experience coming up, obviously being up back in Sioux Falls and stuff like that. But you said tomorrow you fly out, so that's cool. How are you looking forward to the travel day out there tomorrow?
Yeah, it's an easy flight, man. It's 2.5 hours,
Not
quick
bad.
trip from Phoenix up to Sioux Falls. So, um, yeah, I mean, whether I'm going home for holidays or for a fight, I'm used to the travel portion here, and my weight's good. I'm not worried about the weight cut. I'm right where I would want to be on any other weight cut. So, um, it's gonna be smooth, man. It's nothing. It's just another step in the process, and we're just that much closer to getting to the ultimate prize, which is the competition.
Yeah, absolutely, man. That is gonna be a fun fight. I'll be tuning in for sure. And I got one more question for you, but I want to put this out there, man. You are one hell of an interview. You're a very well-spoken guy, and you have a lot to share. I think, this is an awesome interview. I just wanted to put that out there. But down the road, I
Thank you.
got a couple other things I want to ask you about, and I don't want to take up the whole day. But down the road, I want to run it back, get another interview. I'll ask you some other stuff. I want to talk about the wrestling and stuff like that. But if I could ask you one more question today, it's this. You're returning back home, going to fight in front of those people who have been supporting you for probably the longest in your career. You got your parents and your family and everything like that. So, um, what kind of things can people expect to see you do on Friday night out in Sioux Falls?
Man, I think they can expect to see, even like I said, I'm 16 years into my career. I still think they can expect to see the best version of Bryce Logan that they've ever seen. I bring a unique mix of wrestling and striking, and cardio feels great. I think and I think my opponent's good too, and that brings the best out of me. I feel like the bigger the challenge, the more I rise to the occasion. So I'm super grateful to have a game opponent to help me bring the best out of myself. And
Yeah.
I think, like I said, we're not the main event of the night, but I think at the end of the card, we're going to be the fight that everybody was talking about. So, um, fireworks, man. I'm gonna bring it. Um, I'm not interested in, just trying to eke out a victory. I'm coming in there guns blazing, and I'm either coming back with my opponent's head or on my shield, man. And that's my mentality. So, um, come back with your opponent's head or don't come back at all is my mentality going into this one.
Respect, man. Like I said, this is gonna be a banger. I know you, like you said, not a main event, but this could be a people's main event. Would not be surprised to see a bonus go out to this fight after the fight. One of you guys, that's what I meant to say. But obviously LFA being a promotion that does bonuses, I could see this fight being one of those, bonus worthy fights. And I think this is an action-packed fight, fireworks, like you said. But man, thank you so much for the time. Great interview.